bass is on. Thank you. I had originally thought I was going to have to quiet everybody down because usually when class starts, there's still people and everything, and they heard that we were teaching, and they all left. How fast can you get out of the auditorium? So this morning, we are starting with our first chapter from Jesus is the Question, and we have a book called The Questions of Jesus too, so we're just going here and there, and basically what we're going to do, I'll just give you a quick rundown, is that Jeff, Karl, and I will share in the teaching. This morning, Jeff is going to start us out, and we'll work together at the end to have discussion about the chapter and about the thought that he has. And then each week, we'll each of us round through it. And so if you see that we don't agree, you may hear us comment or something, because we all have microphones, so it's sort of the... So Brian will have to be on his toes to unmute us and hear us yell at Jeff or somebody else. So this morning, thank you for coming in to join us. And Jeff, here.
All right. Can you hear me?
Oh, and we're live streaming, so if you have thoughts, we're going to bring the microphone to you, even though we can hear each other. This way, the people online can hear it as well. Because I know, hi, Alice Ferry. She was one of the ones that had asked us to share it live streamed.
So the books we're looking at is The Questions of Jesus by John Deere. How funny. John Deere. And then this one is Jesus is the Question. So this guy, Copenhaver, actually uses this book, the Deere book. I highly recommend them to you. If you want to take a look at them, come up and take a photo. Order them off Amazon. They don't get any kickbacks. So Jesus is asked 183 questions. Some of them he kept silent. He did not answer. As in when Jesus was before Herod in Luke 23. When Jesus was before Pilate on John 19. And even the woman caught in adultery, John chapter 8. He was completely silent. And we'll get to those questions in later classes. Other times Jesus took the question and asked another question. So the coin of Caesar. And who should we pay tax or not? Matthew 22. Other times he rephrases the question to get the inquirer to critique themselves. So the rich man in Mark chapter 10. Other times he answers them directly. So it depends on how you count. So they're saying, some people say 3, some people say 8 times he directly answered a question. That's shocking, isn't it? There's only that many. That's very few. So Jesus asked over 307 questions. Again, it depends how you count. There's no punctuation in Greek, so you have to, there's some fudging there. So the first section in both books, they classify the questions. So this book classifies it as invitation, and then this one classifies it as longing. So that's where we're in. So if you have your Bible, or you can pull a Bible in front of you on your phone, John chapter 1, verse 35. So the next day, John, in this case it's John the Baptist, was there again, and 2 of his disciples were with him. When he saw Jesus pass by, he said, "Look, the Lamb of God." When the 2 disciples heard him say this, they followed Jesus. Turning around, Jesus saw them following and asked, "What do you want?" They said to him, "Rabbi, where are you staying?" "Come," he replied, "and you will see." So they went and saw where he was staying. They spent the day with him. It was about the 10th hour. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of the two who heard what John had said and followed Jesus. The first thing Andrew did was to find his brother Simon and tell him, "We have found the Messiah." And he brought him to Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said, "You are Simon, son of John. You will be called Cephas." So the first question we have that Jesus asks is, what do you want? What are you looking for? Isn't it surprising? He's not addressing our sin. He's not addressing our failures. He's not addressing our shortcomings, but he's asking us, what do you want? It's a good question. Other translations say, what are you after? What are you looking for? What do you seek? It's an important question. Well, you could say that this question transcends time and space. I like the way this book brings out that we could start a daily meditation with imagining Jesus sitting across the table from us, asking us, "What do you want?" You know, as I get older, I kind of feel sometimes that I take on Simeon's mindset. Remember Simeon, when Jesus is presented at the temple? He said, "My eyes have seen your glory. Now your servant can depart in peace." Like, we kind of reword that. In my mind, I reword that and say, "Lord, I've seen enough. I'm ready to go home." I mean, we get that way, don't we? We've seen enough. So it's surprising that the disciples, when Jesus asks this question, "What do you want?" it kind of takes them off guard. They don't answer the question. They answer it with another question: "Where are you staying?" Could it be that they weren't ready to say, "Hey, we're looking for the Messiah"? And John said, "You're it." Maybe it was their say, "Hey, we can go somewhere in private. We can have a deeper conversation about what this means." If I'm not mistaken, there is quite a few self-proclaimed messiahs during this occupation of the Romans. So they kind of didn't want to say it out loud, maybe. So I have a personal trainer, and I had her listen to my sermon that I did back in February, and I was asking her about it. And I asked her about this question: "What do you want?" And I asked her about, in my sermon, I mentioned Paul Gauguin's painting. So it was, 1897, he painted this big canvas. He was in Tahiti. In the upper left corner, it says, translated from French to English, "Where do we come from? What are we? And where are we going?" So I asked her, I go, "Do millennials talk about these questions? Do they even ask these questions anymore?" And it was very insightful what she said. It's like, they do, but only in a safe environment. From what she was saying, the way I translate it is that society has stifled communication because there's a great fear of being judged. So dealing with teenagers, dealing with young professionals, dealing with millennials, we need to create a safe space where those questions could be asked. So, I like the way this book here has the preface is really good. Just want to read a couple sections. So Jesus' questions are to reposition you. To make you own your unconscious bias. Break you out of your dualistic mindset. Challenge your image of God in the world and present new creative possibilities. The preface is written by Richard Rohr, I think is how you pronounce it. So we see a lot of times in Scripture that people knew what they wanted. Last week's sermon, the leper, he knew what he wanted. The blind man, he knew what he wanted. I want to see. And then we look at Paul at the end of his life when he writes in Philippians. He says, I want to know Christ. Yes, to know the power of his resurrection and participate in his suffering. Being like him in his death. How do we get to that point? So we got some questions. Jeff's going to help us with a few questions. And any comments from anybody? It's fair game. We want to make this a little more interactive.
Yeah, and so one of the things is, this picture that Jesus throws out there, he does it 3 times. So what are you looking for? Who are you looking for? And it's one of those things that it drives to a question, I think, for everybody, as Jeff has been mentioning. So our question that I want to throw out there is very first is, Leon, if you want to go to the next slide. What am I looking for? So if we reverse it from just that picture, that narrative of Jesus talking to myself, is there something that you're looking for, that you're striving for? Anybody care to answer, or anybody want to? What am I looking for? That safety thing that you talked about for the teenagers. We're adults. We can.
Hi, everybody. I'm Colleen. I'm kind of quiet here, which is unusual for me. A little bit of background. I was raised in the church, and I left a long time ago. During the pandemic, I felt like I needed to come back to church. And I live out in Jefferson County. I went to online on Sundays, and for several weeks, I'd watch one Church of Christ, another one. I got here, and Jeff was doing a lesson. It was right after what's his name in Minneapolis who got killed? I also have bad memory problems. Yes, George Floyd, thank you. Oh, you can't? I'm sorry. So, it was right after George Floyd, and Jeff was doing a lesson on inclusion and stuff like that, and I heard that lesson, and I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be. I have tons of guilt about being away from church for so long. I was away from God, sort of, because I prayed all the time. I didn't ever study my Bible, That was about it. I prayed. So I still struggle with, feel like I'm forgiven because I did all these things that I knew weren't right. So what am I looking for is to know that I'm forgiven, and the other struggle for me is I know that's faith, that I'm not, that I know in my mind that God's forgiven me because I've asked him and I've confessed, but I still struggle with feeling forgiven. And I don't feel that from you guys. That is internal for me. So that's what I'm looking for, is to really solidify my faith and believe that I've been forgiven for not following him.
I have a t-shirt that I wear all the time that says forgiven. And that's so that whenever I look in the mirror, that I know that I'm the one that's forgiven, and not just you and you and you and you. It was for Jim too, but so I should bring that next week and wear that. So, yes. So anybody else? What are you looking for? I know there's lots of things. Jim.
Well, I'm going to kind of avoid the question and just, I guess, I just thought it was interesting that Jesus, I never really thought of him as a teacher, even though I've heard it said a million times he's a teacher, and I'm a teacher, so I didn't really think of how really good at teaching he was, until you guys mentioned how many questions he asked and how many questions he actually answered. So it's kind of interesting. He's a pretty good teacher where instead of telling you what you should be looking for, I mean, it'd be pretty easy to say, this is what you should be doing, this is what you should be looking for, and he's kind of wanting you to discover it on your own, because that's usually the decisions that we tend to stick with, is when we decide, oh, this is what I want to do. And Jesus is like, well, yeah, I kind of told you that, but I'm glad you discovered it on your own finally. So I think it's neat that, I haven't really thought about this, but yeah, he's a really good teacher.
Yeah, I like the way this book brings out this one paragraph. In general, we see that Jesus' style is exactly opposite of modern televangelism or even mainline churches' approach to Dear Abby bits of inspiring advice and workable solution for daily living. Jesus is too much the Jewish prophet to merely stabilize the status quo with platitudes or euphemisms. He much more destabilizes the false assumption on which the entire question or one's worldview is built. Worldview is a huge topic within the gospel. It's a subtext, a sub-idea. Is that, and Jesus doesn't hammer people over the head. He doesn't give them the answer. He says, figure it out for yourselves. You are brilliant people. You know the scripture. But then he's also brutal and says, you're a teacher of Israel and you don't know the answer to this question? He can be brutal at the same time.
Well, and this whole picture of cooties that we saw this morning, that's really one of those things that worldview was, you need to know that, sorry, you have cooties, and I'm going to stand over here. This was that picture that was there everywhere. And so, yeah, I mean, it's this whole picture of Jesus as its teacher. The one example I want to give really quick is The Chosen. Has anybody watched The Chosen? Get a few hands up. But the thing about The Chosen movie is that there is almost no teaching whatsoever. You see these examples of Jesus. You see him in the last, season 2, hopefully I don't ruin it for anybody if you're going to watch it. The last episode I just saw the other day, and they're getting ready for the Sermon on the Mount. So you have 2 whole seasons before you get to the Sermon on the Mount, which is one of the very first sermons that Jesus gives. But there's so many things that happen before that, these questions that we're going to be talking about, a lot of them are Jesus teaching via question beforehand. So, Betty?
Well, the question, what do you want? Simple question, very complex answer, because sometimes we don't know what we want. Sometimes it's easier to identify what we don't want. And what we don't want is where we are right now. But then what do I want? What am I seeking? And I'm not sure the disciples knew, John's disciples, when they wanted to follow Jesus. They were just kind of curious, knowing what John was teaching, and then, well, what can this guy offer me? And can he offer me what I want? Which I don't know what I want right now.
Yeah. Well, and that gets really to the other one that Jeff had on his notes was Bethesda. So you have this guy sitting there at this pool trying to get well year after year after year. And Jesus comes up to him. He's like, well, do you want to get well? The answer isn't, of course, because he's gotten used to being where he's at. I mean, we're creatures of habit. I'm fine sitting here almost. Somebody brings me food every day. I'm taken care of. If I get up and I am able to walk now, is that really where I want to be at? So it's a big question. So, Leanne, can we jump to the next slide? If you were to ask people in your circle, so that same circle that Jeff talked about this morning, what you're looking for, what would they say? So I know what I'm looking for. Or maybe I know what I'm looking for. Maybe I don't. But what if you ask my wife? What if you ask Jeff? What if you ask Jim over here? Brian, Karl, anybody else that's in my closer circles most of the time? Or Michelle, part of my small group. She'd probably be critical of me. But so what am I looking for? And what do you, and that's that interesting question about your circle. What do they think you're looking for?
Retirement.
Yeah. Susan?
Well, it seems to me that we're looking to know God, to know better who God is and to get closer, and that Jesus' questions cause us to look into ourselves. But when we come to church or we want to fellowship with one another, it's more like wanting to know a little more about God, or keep me focused, you know?
And the interesting thing about our circles, I know that if you were to ask anybody at my work, what am I looking for, you wouldn't probably hear as much questions about Jesus as you would hear getting the work done. He's somebody that just wants the work done, and he wants it done now. And I'm not the boss. The boss doesn't care, I think, but I'm the one that wants it done. And if it's not done, then I'll come and do it. And whether or not that's good or bad is another question. But that's one of those things, I think, that if you ask my wife, she'd probably say something. It's good she's not in here. She probably actually raise her hand and want to talk and say, I know what you want. And so, but that's where we struggle, because depending on where we're at, we're very multi-faced, let's say, and because we do so many different things. But I think that it's one of those things that Peter, whenever he's out there fishing, he wanted to get out of that boat and come in and take a nap. It was very clear. We've already cleaned the nets. We are done. Come on, just go out a little bit further and let's do it one more time. No, Jesus, I'm not doing that. I'm ready for a nap. And he's like, fine. You're just going to keep bugging me, I'm going to do it. Goes out there and gets the biggest catch of fish he's ever had, and he quits fishing. He's like, I'm not doing this again, I'm done. But he went to fish for men. So it's very interesting, this, what are you looking for? And what people say about you. He was probably the best fisherman or the tiredest fisherman, I don't know. He was old and had been there for a long time. last question I think that we have on our list, but we can talk for a long time. Leanne, if you want to jump to the last one. What interferes with your search for those things you most wish you were looking for? What interferes with the search for those things you most wish you were looking for?
I would say life interferes with what I'm looking for. And the realization that I really am not in control of things. So, and probably those who really know me know that I like to be in control. So, you know, life throws you curveballs when you least expect it. And I just want to be able to sit in my chair and study and do whatever, and life doesn't let me do that.
Yes, very true.
I'm looking for truth. Of course, Jesus said, I am true, when he was before Pontius Pilate. He's also the way and the life. So by focusing on the truth that Jesus is and the things he taught, things that interfere me with looking for that is the deluge of too many non-truths around me all the time. So I have to focus on truth and try to live my life in an ocean of mistruth and non-truths. So I'm looking for truth, and I've found it in Jesus.
So I would say that I get in my own way of what I'm looking for the most, plenty. Especially just understanding how eager Jesus is to be close, spend time, and to help deal with any and every one of the sins that is in between where I am today and how he's making me like himself year by year, day by day. So I know I get in the way. I believe, and that's, to me, that's something that is special about being here, because we've all gotten our own way. We're on a journey together to allow Christ to help us not get in our own way more and more. And then I think we share a common enemy as well. I think he gets in the way as well. So I agree with everything said and just adding those two.
Yeah, I like Jason's answer. That's what I feel a lot of the time. It's me being in the way. Life is definitely flowing all the time, but I know even at work. So we had this issue come up. I found a solution really quick. I was like, hey, this is great. Let's push it through. We convinced everybody else, hey, this is what we should fix. We fixed it. And then 2 weeks later, that was not the best solution. And so then now we've had to push all of it back to the way it was before so that we can find a better solution. So it's that Jeff there, that you guys all know it was me that caused it, but everybody else still doesn't see it because I was able to cover, or it was covered enough to where there was enough of us giving approval for it that everybody's now blamed for it, but as opposed to just me, but it was my idea. So, I mean, that's the way it is a lot of times with family life or church life or anywhere else that we're at, trying to get things done, and it's me either finding a new idea or this or that, and then it causes the other things to tumble down. So I'm not sure how long class actually lasts. Anybody know? Is it?
I was going to say something. I wasn't going to say anything, but so if I could just like try to combine things, right? So what interferes with your search for those things you most wish you were looking for? So a little bit of what Jason said and what Betty said, like, so life, myself, but for me, it's expectations. So my expectations for what I have for myself, the expectation Christ have for me, then you have family, then I have work. And so just thinking about all those things on a daily basis, my anxieties, my worries, those things is what really interfere on a day-to-day basis for like just getting and interrupting in what I have as far as like a long-term goal or trying to get closer to Christ and just trying to set up priorities. So for me, I would say expectations from like different outside and then for myself.
So I think we have 2 minutes in front of here. Let Judy answer, and then I think we'll throw it back to Jeff.
I was just thinking with myself that it would probably be I don't really prioritize things that I should and make them some things that should be more important than other things. I don't always, put that first. So that interferes with what I'm looking for.
Jeff, you have a closing thought for us?
Trying to find my notes online. Oh, there it is. The schedule. So next week, do you see this woman? Is the question.
So next week is Church in the Park.
That's
2
2 weeks.
Which is the 18th.
So Luke chapter 7, 36 to 50. That's in 2 weeks. Do you see this woman is the question. And Jeff and Karl are teaching. 2 weeks.
Yeah, in 2 weeks. So the next week is Church in the Park, so we will not have class. And then the week after, on the 18th, will be, do you see this woman?
That's the
is
next
the
question. Yeah.
Is that 25th? I don't even know what the date is today.
So
Just numbers.
it's Luke chapter 7,
In 2 weeks.
36 to 50.
Yeah, and the topic is
That's a good question. I don't know. It's identity about compassion,
yeah,
according to
identity or compassion.
questions
So
about
today
compassion.
was invitation and longing.
Yeah.
That idea of
So
what
this
we're
is-
longing for, what we identify with.
This is a great class, guys. I just want to comment about Jesus when they asked, "Where are you staying?" And he said, "Come and see," which to me just shows his wisdom of, he has said he didn't have any place to stay. Well, that might have just turned them off. And I think it's a message to us too, to sometimes just take it day by day and see where we're headed and just make an effort to grow day by day and follow him.
Yes, very, very true. So thank you guys for being in the class, and we will be back here in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
So have a great Church in the Park next week.